Konnichiwa, everyone. Welcome back to the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. I am Mike for at least another week, and until Joe comes to his senses. You can find me on Twitter at Kawano Mike, Joe at Iowa_Joe86. And y'all are in luck today as Joe has made it happen and found us a respectable guest to join us. Please welcome Jason Perone to the pod. Jason, at Jason Perone, is the host of the Quick Slants pod on Game On Wisconsin, a co-host of the PackADay pod, and will now be adding a live game day content for pro sports fans apps this season following the Packers. Jason, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you were trying to get a respectable guest, but he couldn't make it, so you got me instead.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. We got the international man of mystery here. He's somehow integrated himself into the Lambo mystique there.
We got the Derek Zoolander of the
green screen, y'all. Technology, embrace it. I'm as good. We were talking before the show started. I'm as good at setting up this green screen as I am at doing this new math that they're teaching the kids in school.
That means that you're just a well-oiled machine, Jason. But God. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be asking for your thoughts on where the team sits as we've closed out preseason and head into what is going to be final roster reductions. Everyone remember, the NFL no longer does the step-down roster reductions where they used to go from like 90 to 75 to, I think before there was even a 60 in there, something like that. Now it's just, they just hack it all down at once from 90 to 53 coming up on Tuesday, I believe, at 4 p.m. Eastern. So, Jason, just anything off the top of your head in terms of where the team stands going into this, coming out of this final week, I should say, of preseason?
Ooh, man, this season's going to be a lot of fun. And it's more intriguing than usual because of all the changes and everything else that has gone on. So the roster predictions, like I find myself tuning in to some of the topics that I've skimmed over in the past because it's like, okay, we know Rodgers is Rodgers' team, right? We know who the receivers and all the offense is going to be. This year on both sides of the ball too, there's a lot of youth, a lot of change, and it's actually really worth tuning into. I mean, all of those, any chance I could get to get an after practice recap, and a lot of them came from Andy Herman over at PackADay Podcast. Shout out to Andy. So valuable because we didn't get a chance to see a lot of the practices. I wanted to know what was going on. How did Jordan Love look? Did Anders Carlson miss another 16 field goals, heading into the season? What types of things am I going to be banging my head against the wall for? But I'm excited about this team. And I did Quick Slants earlier this week and talked about roster predictions with Miranda. Murder She Wrote on Twitter if you want to give her a follow. That was a great show, a lot of fun to record and going through the roster, healthy conversation because there's so much in flux right now. So it's worth talking about. For the first time in a long time, every position group is worth a conversation, right?
Right. And like we were kind of talking about earlier, this is my least favorite time of the season because we spend too much time, or not too much time. We enjoy these players in the preseason games that we don't normally get to see. So we kind of build a little bit of you could call it a bond with these guys, and now, by the end of the week, most of them won't even have jobs anymore. So, it's really a tough time of year, but I've always liked preseason football because these are guys that are living and dying with every play. I mean, yeah, you get your starters out there and whatever for a few plays, but then towards the middle to the end of the game, it's these guys that are living and dying. They're out there playing their best games in hopes of making that roster. So I've always loved the preseason games. I know they were in the big push. Oh, well, they need to cut more games, only make it a 2-game preseason. It's like, no, I'd rather have the 4 of them back because there's more stuff to watch, and sometimes they can be just as fun games as they are in the regular season. And so, but yeah, this year's team is going to be exciting. I've said that a lot throughout the episodes and everything, that I think this is the year that I've been more excited for than years past. Like Jason said, we were so used to, oh, well, we got Rodgers, so we're going to at least win this many games. And, we got this and we're going to at least do this. But now we don't know. I know friend of the show, Jacob Westendorf, has said this before. that he doesn't think that there's any way the Packers lose or win just 3 games. Well, honestly, with the way this season could go, the Packers could win 3 games. They could win 13 games. They could win 9 games. We don't know. There's no guess to it. So, so this season's going to be great, one way or the other. We'll make it that way.
Totally agree, because it's one of the first year. It's probably the first season about 5 that the team doesn't have the expectations of this is a make it or break it year kind of thing. Because, I mean, that's kind of what happens when you move on from a Hall of Fame quarterback. And like you both have mentioned, this is the first time where, due to lessened expectations, roster turnover, which are a bunch of different factors, where you have multiple positions where you don't know who the top, really, some of them you don't necessarily who's locked in on the 2 deep for any of these positions kind of thing and stuff like that. So whereas in the past it was like, well, you definitely got your 11 starters on offense, you've got like 9 of 11 on defense kind of thing, and who the guys who don't win those 2 spots are going to be the top backups kind of thing and stuff like that. Whereas this year, I feel like there's a lot more variability coming up in the season, and it, like you both said, and like many have said, it does allow for a lot of different brainstorming for what the final 53 man is going to look like. And there's some factors like a little bit deeper on the list that are going to influence how they construct this roster. Just in terms of like the IR return rules and things like that. But I guess, coming out of this week, going into the game against the Seahawks, like Jason was saying, a lot of the updates we were getting from practice, following guys like Andy Herman, Paul Brettel, and then, of course, the guys on the beat, Schneidman and stuff, they were posting that.
I got to throw that name in there. He was good enough to do the show, so I got to at least throw
Joe just wants to sound smart, like I'm up on my Polish pronunciation. All right. I think it's Polish, right? Isn't it?
Hell, I don't know. I know it's Wisconsin.
Well, I will say I remember when I first started writing and podcasting, and that was a mystery for 2 or 3 years until he finally pronounced it, and now I've forgotten how to say it, so I'm going to mute myself again. All right, Mike, where you left off? Sorry.
No, we're good.
The beat guy.
So the beat dudes, and Cassidy Hill. Cassidy has been a great addition to the beat. So Love had another really good week of practice, and he definitely carried that into the game. We just heard that he was continuing to, make good decisions, which he definitely has carried into the games. That's something that Joe and I covered last week's show, is that one of the most important things we've seen is that he's gone through his progressions well, and he's just made pretty good decisions with the ball. We haven't seen him put too many throws into harm's way this preseason, which, the last couple of years we've seen him, I think he had 5 interceptions in like 5 preseason games the last 2 years. So it's good to see that he came out with none, and it's not a function of no one could catch the ball on the defense kind of thing. There weren't many where you're like that wasn't a great choice or anything like that. So that's really good to see from a young quarterback, young in terms of how many starts he has under his belt. The other big news for the Packers this week is that Rashawn Gary was back on the field and apparently was every bit the monster he was prior to his ACL injury. Obviously, he is going to be on some kind of snap count because, he is somewhere in that range. By the time week 1 comes around, he will be 10 to 11 months post ACL repair surgery, which the team is obviously going to treat with, some form of kid gloves, because unless you are one short-lived free agency addition, this is a team that treats injuries with, caution, with a cautionary approach. They won't rush guys back, until the team and the player is 100% comfortable with where the player is at. So, and that's another thing that later on will dovetail into roster decisions. We also heard that the pass rush was, again, just keeping heat on whoever was in the pocket for the Packers in practice, which, seeing how our O-line has played in the preseason, that just is one of the most encouraging things to hear coming out of practice, because, it's not like, the last few years where we've joked like, oh, some offensive player looks good in practice. Are they really good? Or is it just because they're playing the Packers defense every day in practice? Safety, unfortunately, remains question mark, but honestly, based on what they had in the box, coming into the season, I'm not really surprised that they aren't willing to kind of stand out and say, like, this is the plan moving forward. I know LaFleur has kind of said that he's hoping Ford is the starter going into week 1, but he's kind of left it. He hasn't really shown a lot more light onto it than that. And in all honesty, I'm fine with Ford or Owens even being the starter opposite Savage, because let's be real, Chicago is going to try and do more running things than passing things in week 1. So I'm fine with a guy who can play in the box a little more in week 1. And my last point was Carlson was working his way back into being Anders Carlson due to the week of practice he had. But in the preseason game, he reestablished that he is, in fact, Anders Carlson. So just like we've seen guys who have been successful, they get to tell us how to pronounce their name. And as long as he keeps booming kicks through like he did in the preseason game, unlike how he was struggling in practice last week, he can continue to be Anders Carlson. So
I have to say that's why when Anagbury came out, someone said, "Hey, how do you pronounce your name?" He probably very cleverly said JJ. Right?
Well, like Big Bob. It was everybody was calling
him Tanya, and we realized it was Tunyon. Yeah.
Until he went on that one podcast and said, "No, it's Tunyon."
Yeah. 3 years later, he just let everyone mispronounce it and just moved on with it. My conspiracy theory, my biggest Packers name conspiracy theory is surrounding Brett Favre, because you explained to me how it's pronounced Favre the way it's spelled. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, and here's one for you. Going with the Favre, I'm kind of a true crime type guy, and there was a lawyer on a case that was spelled the same way, but it was pronounced Favre. So you're onto something, Perone. I mean,
yeah,
I think he just did it to screw with us.
That or he was just very simple-minded. He's like, you can call me whatever, just give me the ball. No, but I mean, to your points, Mike, actually, one thing I did want to say, I want to ask you guys your opinion on something, because this was an interesting preseason game watching Jordan Love, because his numbers were good. Like you said, he did take care of the ball pretty well. Stat line was good. Against Seattle, though, what seemed to me was like he was just a tick, and I don't even mean like a full step. I mean, he was just a tick, I'll call it late, to where the ball got there, but the defender's already draped on the receiver. Right. Yeah. So, and he did sidearm a couple. So it's like, you got a little, speaking of Favre, you got a little Favre-esqueness going on there. Hey, I can squeeze this in there and sidearm it a little bit. I'm curious to see how these first couple games are going to go against starters and live NFL defenses, because he's going to have to make quick decisions, which he does. But with some of these passes, it's like, if he's not darting it and overthrowing Luke Musgrave, which I don't know how you do that, due to 6'6", right? It's almost like he needs a little bit more pep at times. And then obviously, Mike, you and I talked on Twitter yesterday about the bomb to Watson. It's easy to underthrow Christian Watson because of his speed, but you don't want to leave your receiver hanging out there. And I was overall more encouraged than not by what he did. But I'm just curious if you guys noticed the same thing, because more so even in the first 2 preseason games, to me, it's like his decision making is there. I just hope that twitch is there and he gets the ball there on time, because these receivers with their speed and their spacing, a lot of opportunity for yak, which is something we haven't seen a lot of lately.
I thought the same thing yesterday when I watched him throw that deep one to Watson that got hung up in the wind. I know it's hard to gauge the wind, but knowing that it's blowing in your face, you got to throw at least, trajectory. You got to throw it like higher, lower, whatever. That's your job to understand how to get it to your player. And then in the Bengals game, there was the deep bomb to Watson that it was a good pass. It was good placement, but the safety read it so well. So do you put it out a little bit further, because Watson's going to be able to catch up to it for the most part, or what? So yeah, he's still got a little bit of learning to do with that. And like we talked about in the last week's episode, what's going to make or break him is how he progresses throughout the year. It's okay to make those mistakes now, but it's not okay to make those mistakes when we're hitting October and November and December. So as long as he's learning from them, then I'm okay dealing with it for a little bit. But if it's getting later in the season, then you got to say, okay, what's going on here? But I have to say he's looking more confident. There is a hitch to him, so I don't know if that's still, mechanic wise. I don't know if that's still reading. There is a bit of a hitch to him. I don't know. I just, like I said, as long as he's learning from it and it doesn't continue on towards the end of the season, then I'm all right.
No, yeah, totally makes sense. And yeah, Jason, we talked about it a little yesterday, and I look at it, I chalk it up more to being because we have seen him on throws this preseason. The example I used yesterday was the third down throw he had to Dobbs last week against New England, where he hits the top of his drop and that ball is out. It's on a line and it's right in Dobbs's hand, his breadbasket. And yeah, it's hard to get into the psychiatry of, why is that throw looked late kind of thing.
God,
the one
don't get into psychiatry.
Especially not with the way my mind works. But no, the throw that I was thinking of when when I saw your tweet yesterday, Jason, about how stuff was a tick late was the I think it was on the first drive. It was where they ran the play action. Love steps up in the pocket, and it almost looks like the throw on the deep over to Watson is a step late. But when Uglum posted the all 22 for it, it's actually an on-time throw because Love is he hits the top of his drop and then he's stepping up and to his left to get himself a throwing lane, and that ball comes out after for baseball players, the equivalent of a crow hop, and that ball is out when his foot touches the ground. And okay, this is as someone who played receiver, not at any level that matters, but honestly, I look at those, and Watson knew it on both of them, I think, but especially the deep ball, you could see Watson he had a damn it moment kind of thing. But even on that deep over, I was kind of like, I know this is super greedy and selfish to say, but I'm like, I need you to come back one step to the quarterback, Watson, because yeah, and I do think the throw that was a little late was he had that slant on third down to Toure. I think it was at the end of the first drive. That was the one where I think I don't know if he second guessed himself on the coverage or what it was, but that throw, it didn't seem totally in rhythm, and he still got it on Toure. But by that point, like Perone said, the DB had broken on it, was able to pretty cleanly break up that pass and end that drive. So those are the ones, like Joe said, we want to just see him continue to refine himself, improve his game as the season moves forward. And I did kind of wonder what this week was going to look like in regard, compared to last week's game, because tradition, at least under Carroll, Seattle has played a pretty uniform, stagnant defense where it's you know what you're going to get. You're going to get that cover 3 shell. They're going to play physical on the outside. They might throw in a trap coverage here and there to mess with a young quarterback, but you're going to, it's a meat and potatoes defense that's predicated on everyone executing well. And so I do wonder if, it's weird how quarterbacks work, because I think sometimes they do get a little bit of paralysis by analysis, because especially when you come off of a week facing a Belichick defense where you're like, okay, it's one of, it's a amorphous, complicated defense kind of thing and stuff like that. And I almost wonder if Love kind of got like, is it really that simple? Some of that, it kind of almost looked like that this week, but it'll be something to definitely track as we move through the year. But the main thing that, like I told Joe last week, the two main things were he took care of the ball, and like I said, it wasn't just a matter of, the Mahomes stat, the interception, drop rate, luck, whatever you want to call it, stat kind of thing. He was putting the ball in good placement, wasn't throwing into double, triple coverage or anything like that. And then the other thing is, Seattle did get more movement up front in terms of pass rush. They weren't necessarily harassing Love, but, they were getting some push on the pocket, and it was good to see Love still look super calm in the pocket, but also have to maneuver himself around the pocket. And the only play where I didn't care for what he did was when he kind of pirouetted out behind Walker and then had to try and throw the ball after he spun out to he was trying to hit Reed, and it came up a little short. I thought the pocket was cleaner and he didn't need to do that necessarily, but it's one of those where I always say that preseason, I look at quarterback play in preseason kind of like MLB pitchers in training camp, where it's like, oh, how does that all-star have a 5 ERA? Well, it's like, well, he's working on a fourth pitch kind of thing and stuff like that. And I do think, and that's why also, like, even with Rodgers, I didn't care how many interceptions he threw in practice in preseason, because it's like, I want them to be like, I'm going to hit that throw that we've never hit kind of thing and stuff like that. I'm going to see if this receiver can, fight for the ball in, this situation kind of thing and stuff. So, like I said, overall, very pleased with how Love handles himself. And, even the stream I had the Seattle stream, and they were kind of talking about how Love, he does look very even keeled on a play-to-play basis. You see him get heated up one play, you see him have a wide open guy, and he's kind of just monotone throughout all phases. You don't see him get too high or too low. And I know some people kind of complain they want to see a little more excitement and all that kind of stuff, but on a play-to-play basis, I do like to see that from a quarterback, that it's like, it's just steady as she goes. And I just think that we've seen enough good things out of Love that I'm to the point that the only question I have is, how good can he be? I'm not worried about him busting out or anything like that. We're going to get, at bare minimum, the worst we're going to get is league average quarterback play. And it's just a matter of, like Joe said, how much improvement we're going to see as the season goes on. Is he going to tighten up some of those loose throws, the high throws? It was nice to see him finally hit Musgrave for 2 yak opportunities this week and give him a chance to run with the ball. So it's those kind of little things that are going to just open up this offense. And that's the thing, is I know that LaFleur has kind of said that the thing they're working on the deep shot is putting more air under the ball. Because that's something they're going to have to do early in the season, is they're going to have to hit some deep shots, keep defenses honest. We all know that everyone and their mother is going to want to load up on the box, take Aaron Jones, take AJ Dillon away. And it's not even a matter of like play action shots. They're going to have to hit straight drop back shot plays. And so, he had the one to Dobbs last week. Would have loved to see him and Watson be able to come up with the one this week, but that's part of the work in progress. The farther you throw the ball down the field, the more factors come into effect. So it's just good to see that, he's taking care of most of the mentals, and it is just kind of refinement that we're hoping to see as we go forward.
League average quarterback play. That's great. That means we're already 2 games ahead of the Bears. Woo!
2 is generous. And not in the way Bears fans probably think.
Kind of to go with something Mike said about well, now I forgot because Mike gets too long-winded, but about the excitement level, I think he actually, some of the misses he makes, and the other thing Mike said about sometimes maybe he's thinking is it really that easy? I think that leads to some of the mistakes he's been making. Like I've said for a bit with the miss he made on Musgraves in the Bengals game. He overshot him by like a mile. Yeah. Well, I think the way it looked to me, and I'm by no means am an analytical mind type guy with this, but the way it looked to me was he saw this guy break free, and that was like his first read, and he was wide open, and he wanted to make sure he got the ball there. Well, he wasn't thinking on the throw. He just let it go, and it went, clear out there. He threw it to center field. But I think that's happening a little bit more now with him, where he's seeing it. He's like, because once Mike said that, it kind of popped in my mind too. Okay, well, maybe he's thinking, okay, is this a little bit easier than what I thought it was? And that first read hits, and man, he just lets it go, but he's not taking the time to think, okay, ball placement. He's just letting it rip. He kind of, and we were kind of joking about this earlier too, that he kind of is in that gunslinger mode, more than the analytical mind of Rodgers, who has to pick apart every little piece. Love just wants to throw it. So, I wonder if that's a little bit more of his problem.
Do you guys remember? I mean, remember back in the day when Favre, one of his first 5 passes would just go into the third row.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, good. Let's get it out of our system now. Jordan has a little bit of it's almost kind of funny that we have our third quarterback in the last 30 years, and we're getting a bit of a combination between the last two.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they've all completed passes to themselves too.
Yeah, that was great. Now I think Love only lost 2 yards. Favre lost like a whole 5 or 6. So we're making progress.
But yep. So I mean, like we've kind of been saying, there's a lot of reason for optimism going into this season, especially with how the Packer season is going to open up this year. But I think Love has answered a lot of questions going into the season. There's probably some people who are, I don't know how much it's bothering them that he's looked decent in preseason play because they're just airheads anyway. But I think he's put to rest a lot of concerns for a lot of Packers fans, and he's going to have some chances opening the season. But to get there, the Packers are going to have to reduce their roster down. And like Joe mentioned, like Jason mentioned, that cut down from, you're cutting 37 guys off of your roster. And, I remember Bill Cowher said, like, it's the end of your journey kind of thing. You work all off season. If you're a guy who doesn't make a roster the previous year, you're just working the whole year, the whole calendar year to make it the next year kind of thing and stuff. And a lot of guys have put a lot of good film on record for themselves this season, and they're going to make some interesting decisions for the Packers. We'll kind of go around the room. Jason, what is the position that you think is going to have, whether it's from a who makes it, how many guy makes it, which position group is the one that you've got an eye towards in terms of who's staying, who's going on the roster?
Safety, I think. I mean, I think that the debate, I have some theories on receiver, but they're more injury related. So for example, everybody keeps talking about 7-7-7. I agree with 7 bodies, but is Dontavian Wicks injury enough where he's going to have to go on IR? Because then that's going to change everything, right? Then now you're down to 6, and now Toure does make the roster because he's a bubble guy. Some people have had him not making the team. I think he will make the team because Wicks, why rush him along? You might as well IR him. He's a rookie. All these rookies need time. Dubose limped off the field against Seattle, right? He just came back to practice a couple of weeks ago and was in his first preseason game. He's not ready to play. He's not going to get claimed. He could easily be somebody, if you want to go heavy at another position, offensive line, for example, that you cut Dubose and bring him back to the practice squad. Again, everyone has said it 1,000 times. There are 31 other teams that passed on him 7 times. I don't think all of a sudden they're going to jump on him after the tape he's put out there, right? It's safety to me because of they didn't address it this season, right? Darnell Savage is moving back there. I think we were actually more excited to see him at corner at the end of last season. And then he got the pick 6 against Minnesota when he didn't have to think so much and be that like robber safety back there because he could just play off of his instinct, which is more at the line of scrimmage. Well, now they're moving him back at deep safety. It sounds like Rudy Ford's going to be back there, which was fine. He had a great game against Dallas, but consistently, is that a safety? He had some struggles at times last year. Jonathan Owens, not blowing the doors down or impressing anybody too much. We don't know how, Tre'Davious Moore's injury, we don't know how bad that is, right? We don't know if that's going to be a long-term thing. So the safety position is really interesting to me. Dallin Levitt's a safety, but he's not going to play safety. He's a special teams player. So they could keep up to 6 bodies on that depth chart there, but who's going to actually end up playing? Are they going to rotate in? You guys made a point earlier, Mike. I don't know which one has said that the Bears are they're gonna probably try to test the box, right, with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, or they're gonna want to take the runaway. I don't know. I think the defenses might try to pick on those safeties earlier than you think. In Chicago, that would be a great game plan for them too, because everybody expects Justin Fields to run all over the place. They've been a run-heavy team in the past, but they don't have the same run game that they did before. I could see them trying to fool Green Bay and go play action and just try to test those safeties early on, grab a quick lead. They got DJ Moore now. They got some receivers that can catch the ball deep. I think that could be a thing that you see early this season because of that safety position. So I'm really curious. And, to cap it off there also, is safety potentially a position where they bring somebody in from the outside off of waivers?
Yeah, it definitely could be a waiver claim situation. I mean, that's how they got Ford last year. more, just like we kind of pointed out at Wicks, kind of briefly going over the wide receiver room. Moore is another one. He didn't come back to practice this past week. Depending on what his injury is, he could be another guy that makes the opening day roster for a minute kind of thing, and then he's put on IR like within the hour kind of thing and stuff. So we'll see. It's not like he's taking up a lot of cap space or anything. If they wanted to do that, it sounded like he was getting first team snaps prior to his injury. So it kind of depends on what the staff thinks about it and stuff, but it does open up to a lot of options. It was good to see Anthony Johnson Jr. be able to play on Saturday after he kind of missed practice on Thursday, I believe, because of a knee. So it was good to see him get back out there. I thought he looked fine. Didn't see any real back end issues this week. Nothing like the Butte touchdown from the New England game or anything like that. And that's the thing is, I know no one wants to hear it, but I thought Savage has looked fine this preseason. I know he's not playing a lot, so there's not a lot of opportunities for him to potentially get picked on or anything like that. But I thought he's looked fine in his snaps out there. To me, safety is like O-line, where it's like, I'm totally fine if those guys' names never get mentioned kind of thing, because that means that, they're not making game-changing plays, but they're also not blowing it for you on the back end of your defense. So if Green Bay can get that from their safety room this season, it's a good year, because like you said, Perone, the plan was not a great one coming into the season, but because of the cap situation, because of having to solidify spots on the roster elsewhere, some position wasn't going to get answered this season, and it has been safety. So at least they do have, they have a wild card in Johnson. I do think he has a decent future. You don't get the number 36 without having one in Green Bay. But I have hopes for him.
R.I.P. Vernon Scott.
No, I haven't given up on him.
Well,
he's a free agent. He's a free agent. He's out there. He hasn't signed. He's not with the team. And it's Travarius Moore, by the way. I don't know who Tre'Davious Moore is. Hey, absolutely. Yeah. No, Vernon Scott's out there, but no. You're right. Yeah. And Anthony Johnson, and I was going to say real quick, Anthony Johnson is a guy, I think they will keep him. I think he might be too tempting for another team, but I could see him being an inactive early in the season, and maybe he finally gets on the field like mid-year.
Yeah.
Right. And, this safety class for the draft was not that great anyway.
No, it wasn't. Right.
So there was no way they were going to upgrade in the draft. The free agent class wasn't that great this past season either. I mean, I think I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but I think there was a couple of them that might have made, whatever, but it kind of makes you wish they would have held on to Amos just to have him in the room for these younger guys like a Johnson or that. But, hey, it is what it is. Obviously Adrian wasn't looking that great last year, so whatever. But I do think there's going to be a waiver claim of some kind. Either that or there's going to be a trade, kind of like the one that the Patriots and the Browns did earlier, where they traded Pierre Strong for Tyrone Wheatley Jr. It's just going to be one of those, just swapping guys, hoping they'll nail something. Because who was it that pointed it out? Was it Wendell that said that Gutekunst has always made a trade every year of those type of players?
Yep.
And so I could see that happening. It's not going to be a Budda Baker. I mean, let's face it. We'd love to see Budda Baker, but they're not going to trade for Budda Baker. Money's the issue.
Yeah, they don't have the room to do that.
Right. So safety room is going to be interesting, so to say. But I also wouldn't put past, depending on the Stokes situation, depending on where they think Carrington's at, depending on, all that stuff, I wouldn't put them past putting Rasul back there. I know that's the big topic out of last year, and I know that was the big thing that Rasul kind of said in one of his media times, which was kind of funny because he says that, and then Barry's like, well, we've never said anything to him about that. So, I mean, it is what it is, but, I don't know much about Rasul outside of what he's done for the Packers, but I guess that was his position coming out of college. So it's not like it's going to be a brand new position for him. He's going to have some learning issues going back to it from playing corner, but it is a possibility. But you would have thought that they would have done that a little bit in the preseason just to get his feet wet in it. But who knows? You might see that. But to kind of touch on the wide receivers, because that's going to be the big question, obviously. Like Jason said, Wicks and DeBose, and is Malik Heath making the team? Is this one making the team? Is Torrey making the team? I said when I did my 53, I did mine last night, I could see Torrey getting cut and being, if he makes it through waivers, being brought back on the practice squad or just sit there on, because I have a feeling that whether it's Wicks, whether it's DeBose, whichever one, they're going to make the initial roster until it becomes official. Then they'll put them on the short-term IR. Because, now with all the rules, you can bring them back within a couple of weeks. Well, it might be an injury that's only a couple weeks out, and then they can bring him back and let him play. And same thing goes with the running back. Because, let's face it, I hate saying it. I really hate saying it. Because he's my dude. Go Hawks. But this shoulder injury really took it out of Tyler Goodson's bid for RB3.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just hoping he comes back. He'll be able to go to the practice squad or whatever. But I technically only kept 2 running backs, obviously Jones and Dillon. But like friend of show, Ben or Lambeau LeBeau asked me, well, you have, do you think Nichols is your RB3? Well, no, it's kind of the same thing. I have a feeling what they'll do is keep him on the initial roster, and then they will IR him, for the short term. Now, it all depends on what his injury is, because obviously we haven't seen him play throughout the whole preseason. So maybe it's something that they just IR him for the season, redshirt him, call it good. Same thing with Dontavian Wicks. We had, 1 or 2 good plays out of him, and then we didn't see him again. So it could be just, all right, we'll IR him, redshirt him, call it good. Torrey's safe. Malik Heath. I don't see how Heath can't make the team. He's put up too much. The only thing that he hasn't put up is the yak. But is that because he's not getting the routes to put up the yak? Is that QB play? Or is that inability to put up the yak? Not sure. But I just don't see how he can't make the team. So I know we can get into like a whole 2-hour podcast just on the wide receiver group, but I just think there's going to be guys that are going to make the team initially, but then hit that short-term IR. Rashawn Gary is another guy that I kind of wonder about whether, they brought him off the PUP, but I think and I could be completely wrong, but if they're on PUP during the preseason and they start the season, don't they have to continue on PUP?
Yeah.
Don't they automatically start over on PUP?
Oh, no. Once you're activated, you're active. So and I don't know if there's you can go on short-term IR once you've come off the PUP. But so what it is if you on PUP at any point in the preseason, you're on PUP until you get activated. So Rashawn's activated. Stokes is still on PUP. So if that doesn't change,
PUP will stay on, or Stokes will stay on PUP.
Can.
Well, I wonder
Gary
if
cannot.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if what they did was they activated Gary because he's soon, but I don't know if he's soon enough to be I could see maybe not go on IR because I think Mike was saying that they can't do that. But I could see it where he doesn't suit up for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because he's still working back and whatever. He's obviously looking good in practice. He's already progressed up to where he's doing 11 on 11. So he might be only a short time away. But I could also see them being kind of reserved with the injury and kind of saying, all right, well, we're not going to play you the first week. who knows? But I just see some of that stuff happening with some of the current people who are kind of dealing with injuries.
No, yeah, makes a lot of sense. And yeah, receiver is the big one. And kind of curtailing into edge, that's why I have Brenton Cox making the roster. It is
like
one
Cox,
of those.
We know it
so much, but no, it's always hard to tell because edge rusher, we've seen how much of a premium there is on pressuring the quarterback. The biggest thing with Cox is we haven't seen him do it against a starting O-line in the preseason. And so it's kind of like, okay, how much of it is you're going against guys that you're just better than kind of thing and stuff like that. But he's put a lot of good film on this preseason.
But to counter argue that, at least he's doing it against players that he should be doing it against.
Yes, absolutely.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. I talked about it on Quick Slants. And I said, I don't care if you're playing third string on third string. If there's a play in front of you, you still have to make the play. Quay Walker dropped a touchdown or an interception that was thrown right at his chest in practice. You still have to make the play.
Yep.
And Brenton Cox is always around the football. So I'm with you, Mike, 100%. You know what? Even if Rashawn Gary's ready to go week one, Brenton Cox should still be on this team.
Yeah.
Because even if Rashawn is ready to go, and the thing with Rashawn is he did go through pregame warm-ups on Saturday, which is a interesting little note. I know most people won't see it, but it's one of those where it's like a progression. You get back to practice, got back to team activities, you start to get yourself into the mindset. And, just for reference, Kenny Clark did pregame warm-ups for New England, and then, he played 2 drives against Seattle this week. So not saying Rashawn would have played if there was still a 4th preseason game, but it's kind of like, okay, you can see that, you can see that light coming down the tunnel kind of thing and stuff. So, but even if he's ready for week one, we don't know how many snaps he's going to play. I kind of think he might be capped out at like 10 to 15 anyway. Probably isn't going to play too many base downs. He'll be active, and I don't know if he'll start necessarily kind of thing. You probably walk, some combination of Preston and Hollins or Inaugury
Well, now,
out.
Here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we were starting the season in Detroit. Are you putting him back on that Detroit surface week one?
Well, the funny thing is Chicago is probably worse,
the turf is worse.
Yeah, I know, but he got injured on the Detroit turf, and we know that's been a big battle. David Bakhtiari said it. The NFLPA has said it, that stuff needs to be gone because it's like playing on concrete. Yeah. So if we were in this situation where Rashawn's looking good, and we were playing Detroit week one, would you still want him to suit up and play, or would you want him to take the week off? Because like you guys just said, Soldier Field's field isn't that great either. It's not like playing on concrete, but you got to kind of take that into play. Do you want him to play and, maybe the knee's not as stable at the moment, or do you just let him go all out?
Right. And that's kind of one of those, not to be a cop-out, but we're not in the room, but friend of the show, Jacob Westendorf, says, you're cleared to play, you play kind of thing and stuff.
Yeah,
and,
but Westendorf's biased because, he calls Rashawn his son, so he wants him out there on the field anyway.
Well, and the Packers training staff is also very conservative. So if they're clearing Rashawn Gary, I think they've already thought, honestly, as funny as we might be kind of being about these points about Soldier Field turf and in Detroit turf, like they've already thought about stuff like that.
Yeah.
If he's cleared to practice and play, I'm pretty encouraged that if he wanted to be out there for the first snap in Chicago, he could be. Now, I trust the coaching staff to be smart about what they're going to do with him, though.
Yeah.
Right.
And okay, this is getting really deep in the weeds. The only reason I wouldn't start him is because, like Jason said, Chicago is probably running some kind of mixed direction trick play for their first play just to see if they can. Last year we saw him run a flea flicker, and Fields had the long touchdown run and stuff like that. So, they're going to throw the kitchen sink and stuff. So,
but that goes to another point I was thinking of when Jason was talking about the safety group. I think with as much as they've built up on the defensive line and the edge rushers and the linebackers, I think they're hoping their rush will kind of
overcompensate
for what's not there in the back end. So
that's absolutely true.
Let's get Rashawn out there. You know, I know they were even practicing Van Ness with the DL there for a bit in training camp. So I think what they're hoping for is that their rush will stop the quarterback from making those deep throws to force him to check down. And let's face it, you know, I'm sorry, Chicago fans, but Justin Fields is not a deep ball type of guy. He's a dink and dunker, and when his first or second read's not there, he's a glorified running back. So I think if they can put the pressure on him like they've done in the past, I don't think I don't think they're gonna worry about the safety. Now it's gonna come to the time when they get to the better teams per se that have an offensive line that can hold up to the pass rush. That's when we're going to start worrying about our safeties. Mike, you're muted.
You're on mute.
They've got a runway up to that. Thank you. They've got time to get that straightened out, because I mean, Detroit is the best O-line out of their first. Let's see. Detroit's the best O-line they're going to see for a while, in my opinion.
Let's go through. They got Chicago, right? Then they've got Atlanta, and Atlanta's coming up, but they're not quite there yet. Does New Orleans have a decent line? I don't in week 3.
Their tackle situation ain't great. I think Trevor Penning is supposed to start at left tackle. I haven't watched a lot of their preseason this year, but
so you could be right then, because Detroit's not bad.
Yeah. Because then it's the Raiders, the Broncos, who haven't watched a lot of recently, but I know they had issues last year. And then Minnesota's O-line, the Rams O-line. So it's going to be the pass rush is going to have this chance to get its legs under them, which is good. Like you said, it's going to help the safety room. And then having the quarterback situation kind of nailed down. You know, you have you have Jair healthy, you have Rasul, Nixon, Valentine might be getting snapped. You know, we saw that he was getting some slot snaps in this game and stuff. Just as much as they didn't address safety, they've got a lot better answers at the other levels of defense. So it does, you know, it's not a good situation in terms of contending for a title. You know, that's, you know, they're not there. And frankly, with the questions on what Love is going to be this year, that's fine. I am fine that they don't have all the pieces together all over this roster, but they have enough other good, really good pieces on every other level of the defense that it's like they can get by with, you know, the duct tape answer at safety this season. And, you know, to me, it's really just by the end of the season, the two questions that I want to have answered are, is Anthony Johnson part of the future, and is Darnell part of the future? And that's all I want to find out by the end of this season in terms of the safety run.
I'll tell you right now, I think Anthony Johnson is going to get every chance to make it and stay. And I'll be surprised if he's the only safety under contract beyond this season. So the answer there is yes. Right. I mean, they don't have, and he's cheap. And I think, like I said, I think if he finds himself on the field by midseason, even if he's not starting, that's a huge win for the Packers. A 7th round pick getting in there, playing meaningful snaps at a position where they're thin and don't have anything for the future. I'll be honest with you, Mike and Joe. I don't know what your thoughts are. I think Darnell Sapp, this is his last season in Green Bay. I mean, he's a 1st round pick. If he was going to be somebody that they wanted to keep longer term, I think he's already under contract longer than this season right now. Now, sure, anybody can go out and ball out this year and change our mind. But again, he's moving back to the position where he was so average and struggled. I don't know that I would I wouldn't run out and buy, unless it's on super clearance at the, you know, I wouldn't run out and buy that 26 Darnell Savage jersey. But I don't know what your guys' take is on that. He could have a great year, but I'm a little dubious.
My thing with Savage is I wouldn't view him as a one-hit wonder. You're right, Perone, where you're kind of like, is it a mirage? Is it the pressure? And, you know, a lot of guys, they play their best when they're trying to get their next contract kind of thing. But we've seen really good play out of Darnell for a season and a half between 2020 and the middle of 21, where he kind of lost it kind of thing. So I wouldn't have as much lack of trust in it as, if he had just not been good the whole time he was in Green Bay. So it'll be the likelihood, as much as I always say I haven't given up on Savage, it's more likely than not that he is just a part of this season's puzzle and not necessarily a long-term piece moving forward. But there's still, he's still a talented, physically gifted athlete. And safety does take time. I know no one wants to hear it, but, it did take Collins 4 years to really get it all figured out.
True.
And, not saying Savage is going to be Collins. They're different players, but it does take time. And we've heard that Barry's system is hard for, and the other factor too is you had the whole thing where we're never going to know what the full story was between Gray and Barry last season. It was obviously untenable moving forward. So maybe clearing that air, maybe that just gets Savage in a better place kind of thing. But like I said, the likelihood is he's not on the roster moving forward. And, like you said, Jason, Johnson is the only guy under contract moving forward. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on for the season. But just going back to edge, that's a position group that I think it's very easy to keep 6. There's, to me, so, like we said, Cox has put a lot of good film, put up a lot of good film in the preseason. The part that I really liked, he didn't have a sack in the preseason, but what I liked this game is that he was finishing plays. He was getting TFLs. He was, he was kind of getting pressure the first, the Bengals game and the New England game, but we saw him bring down the running back for a couple TFLs. Like, it was good to see him finish some of the plays, not just be the initial aggressor kind of thing and stuff like that. So I liked seeing him add some counting stats. And I just think what he can be as a sixth edge, especially with Rashawn, probably getting some, getting more conditioning under him, getting strengthening back. And Lucas not being a finished product by any measure, he's going to take snaps at different positions too. I just think that what Cox brings to the table as a sixth edge is better than, the third running back, a fourth or fifth inside linebacker kind of thing and stuff like that. So I think his path is pretty sewn up to the roster at this point.
Well,
any
with
other
the practice squad rules anymore, it's easier to keep a running back on the practice squad and elevate him at certain games. But I'm going to go back and answer Jason's question about Savage. I personally, unless there's 2 ways that I could see him back on the roster after this year. One, it all comes together and he just has a monster year. I could see them, giving him a contract. Or 2, it's like a super cheap vet min contract just to bring him in as, where it's a simple contract that if they find somebody better, they can cut him, during cutdowns next year. I kind of like Mike said, it's also going to depend on how the DB room is now with a different guy in there than Jerry Gray. I loved Jerry Gray. I thought he did tremendous things, but yeah, there was a big disconnect between him and Joe Barry last year. So it was obvious that they moved on. It sounds like everybody's loving this Greg Williams system in the secondary. So he could theoretically put it all together. To kind of counterpoint what Jason said about the, if they really liked what they had in him, they would have him signed to a contract. They still haven't signed Rashawn Gary to a contract extension. And we know he's put it all together, and we know he's had monster years. So, I mean, theoretically, yeah, you're right, Jason. But, just to play devil's advocate there, if they haven't given Rashawn a contract yet, they're definitely not going to give Savage a contract yet. So, but yeah, those are the only 2 ways that I could see him having a contract. Is one, he just, a dozen interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, blah, blah, blah. And there's no way that they can not sign him, or it's a super cheap, friendly or team friendly deal that there's an easy way out of it.
Kind of going into the regular season, and not just for Savage, but I do wonder if we'll see a bunch of guys play a little more free this season, because, you look at what Savage walked into. He walked into a situation where it's like, you're going to be part of the savior plan at safety. You know, they brought Amos in the same year, and it's kind of like, okay, like we're gearing up to go for a title. Like there's a, you know, it's a different kind of pressure. And whereas I don't want to say there's no pressure, because he is playing for, you know, not just his job with Green Bay, but really his future in the NFL. He can't suck, or he's not going to be around next year and on any of the 32 teams. But I do wonder if, you know, and then looking at it from the roster as a whole, you know, Dobbs and Watson, it was like, you got to be perfect or you're not seeing the ball for a month kind of thing. And I think the only room that has a high level of pressure is the O-line on his. Obviously, I'm not even going to, you know, Love has a different kind of pressure on him this season. But I think the O-line is the group that really is going to have to carry the bucket every week, you know, for this team kind of thing.
Newman has to be gone. I don't care what other moves that they make. Royce Newman has to be gone.
So, okay, Jake Hansen stayed on this team for a couple of years. And my big problem with Jake Hansen was if he's on the roster, then you're going to be tempted to put him in the game. And they started him week 1 last year. Now, Royce Newman is not going to start on this team. He's not even on the second team, right? But if he's on this roster,
they've tried to find spots.
So you're telling me there's a chance? I'm with you, Joe. And listen, they got a room full of riches. To your point, Mike, in the offensive line. Why would be my question?
Yeah, and you know, I've seen the argument I've seen a lot is they have too many tackles. That doesn't mean you cut one just to keep Royce Newman around. Like, and what I was gonna say, Joe, is you and Jason brought up, you know, waiver claims for safety. Guard is the one I'm looking at, where whether it's a, you know, like you kind of brought up, Joe, the trade New England just did. I'd be looking around at guards, you know, who might, you know, not necessarily anyone great kind of thing, but some kind of developmental prospect. You know, a lot of people are going to laugh at this name, but if there's like a Ben Braden type where it's like a guy who can play on both sides of the line and has some, you know, versatility, that's the kind of player that I think Goody would be looking to pick up, kind of, or like Van Lanen comp kind of thing or something like that. I haven't looked at
the one thing that they've missed since Lucas Patrick has left is that guy that can play either center or guard. They tried to do that with Jake Hansen, but that poor guy couldn't snap the ball, and it seemed like he couldn't block the pass, you know, be a pass blocker either. He could run, he could be a run blocker. He's getting pretty good at that, but he couldn't, you know, pass block, and he couldn't snap the ball. And I think that's why you've seen a lot of John Runyon going both, you know, doing both positions, Zach Tom doing all those positions. There was one other one that they were jumping around with, but that's the one thing and I hate to say that they missed it with Lucas Patrick, because Lucas Patrick wasn't even that great of a player, but he was still stable enough that he could play those positions. So yeah, they could waiver claim. You know, one thing I want to mention, because it just popped in my head, I could even see Darnell Savage being one of those that gets traded for a.
Man, I thought he was going to say Darnell Savage is going to play guard. I'm like, well, I want to see that.
Might as well. Who was it that I was taught that? Oh, I don't even remember. But they were talking about putting an O lineman at at safety. You know, why the hell not? You know, get him out there and play him. But it's like, okay, whatever. But, you know, Darnell Savage is in that trade. You know, Royce Newman, if they can get anything in the world for Royce Newman, do it. You know, hell, they got a 7th round pick for Cole Van Lanen, you know, what was it, last year or the year before, and the guy never took a snap for the Packers. If they can get something for Newman, do it. Darnell Savage, if they can get somebody who, you know, sorry, I got a text from somebody. You know, if they can do like a Josh Jackson trade where they traded Josh Jackson for Isaac
Yadam. Yep.
Yadam. You know, if they can do something like that, just to change the scenery type thing. You know, Torre. You know, you never know. Maybe there's a market out there for Torre that they want somebody who's going to be a steady guy that's not going to be like a superstar, but can get it done. Do it that way too. But to your point, Mike, yeah, the waiver claims are going to be interesting because I think they're going to be going for that. We talk about swing tackles. We're needing a swing guard.
Well, they have that guy right now. He just happens to be their preferred right tackle.
Right.
And that's Zach Tom.
Yeah.
And right now, and with Josh Myers, and I'll just say they're going to ride with Josh Myers and hope that these center exchange issues go away and settle themselves down. I mean, he thought he had a free play. It's like, well, make sure the free play is there first before you snap the ball. First of all, you lose the football. Secondly, you're going to get your quarterback killed trying to recover a fumble. And then he snapped the ball right at Musgraves, as he was crossing over in motion there. So Myers, they have to hope that works out, because if that doesn't work out, now you're moving your right tackle in its center, right? I'm assuming that they would keep Jenkins at left guard, because Jenkins can play center too, right? Yeah. So I assume that you're moving Zach Tom in its center and then putting either Rasheed Walker or Yash out at right tackle, which fortunately the Packers have the option to do right now today. They have that room full of riches where they can do that, but you want your 5 guys at a preferred spot. And again, after the last 2 season openers, just the absolute clunkers that they've put up, they please field 5 guys that can play, that can block, so we can win this game for once.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Not starting Hansen and Newman next to each other on the same side of the line will do wonders for a week 1 opener. So that's something that we're luckily going to be saved from seeing this season. But yeah, I think there's going to be like 45 really easy decisions for the front office. And then it's going to be those last, I'm saying 8, but anywhere from 8 to a dozen players where it's going to, those are the discussions that none of us are privy to, where, I have this joke with Dallin Levitt's a whipping boy to a lot of people, but I'm kind of like, I don't know what
teams, man, special teams.
Yeah. But the thing is, he's not even that good on them, but that's beside itself. So,
I dare you to look Rich Bisaccia in the face and tell him that.
I know. I wouldn't.
He's a Bisaccia guy. He'd eat you alive.
He literally is on the depth chart as ST. It's not even an S. It's ST.
Yeah.
So I got one question. As long as
we don't see 6 in the defensive backfield, we're good.
Oh, yeah. I honestly, I see Dalvin Levitt as the Jarrett Bush of this current roster. He's mainly a special teams guy, but if you see him getting put into the defensive scheme, then we're kind of in trouble as is. But all right, so my question, since we're on the 53, give me your surprise roster addition on 53 and your surprise cut from the 53.
Jason, you can go first.
All right. Well, my addition might also lead to the cut.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a cop-out answer. I think Daniel Whalen's going to be your punter.
Okay.
Because if they think that Daniel Whalen can be serviceable and do most everything that Pat O'Donnell can do, you're going to go with the young guy. This is the year to do it. The team is building youth. They're going youth movement. Pat O'Donnell might be the oldest guy on the roster right now. So I think Daniel Whalen could end up being the punter as long as they trust him to hold. And, the Quick Slants podcast that I did, Miranda made a good point and said that I think the holding alone might be what keeps O'Donnell, because you've got a young kicker who's been shaky in practice. But I'll go with Whalen just because there's got to be a surprise somewhere. And we've had all these undrafted free agents kind of thrown at us all summer to where it's like, it's not a huge surprise for me to say Malik Heath or Brenton Cox, right? We already talked about those guys. As far as a cut goes, I think you're probably, if they're not going to IR a Wicks, for example, I think it could very possibly be one of the receivers. Samori Toure will be the first one that comes to mind for me. But whatever they end up doing, you got to trust them, because like you said, they've flipped players who have never played a snap for them and done good things. And it's not like these guys have gone on to great careers and we just missed it completely. So I'll go with those 2.
Joe, you want to go first?
No,
or next,
you go ahead.
Okay.
You go ahead.
Okay. So, my surprise make it would be Keandre Thomas, the cornerback. I thought he's had a pretty solid preseason. So my 5 corners that I've got on the projection that I did are Ja, Razul, Nixon, Valentine, and Thomas is the last one that I've got going. So he'd be beating out Shamar, John Charles, Ballantyne, and I just think Thomas has put together a pretty good preseason. So not like Jason said, not a super big surprise kind of thing, but just someone that no one's really talking about making the roster. And then this is going, yeah, I would say surprise cut or not making it would be if they traded Nyman at this point. I just don't see it, but who knows if someone is going to throw them something better than whatever comp pick they might get for him. I saw some people floating that he might be a cut. They're not cutting him. There's no way they're cutting him at this point. He's going to net them some kind of comp pick. So, and I'm of the mindset that as much as I trust Bakhtiari, I think they've got the system for him going forward to keep him healthy and on the field. I just don't, especially when the biggest goal of this season is to get a good evaluation of what Jordan Love is and who he can be. I don't see how or why you're going to cut guys who have starting experience at tackle on a, and not just he started games, but he was starting for the best team in football at the time that he was out there in 2021. So I just can't see how you're cutting a guy with that kind of pedigree to him. You go and get the best return. And if that return is someone throws a round 3 pick at you, just like, oh my God, we need a tackle.
No third rounders.
Yeah, no third rounders.
No third rounders.
With the our
they're breaking the curse with Ryan and Kraft. This
is it. No threes. No threes till further notice, man. 4 me up, 5 me. What is this? What's a game out in Vegas where 4s and 5s are good? Whatever that is, that. No threes.
We'll even package our current 3 to move up to like a second.
All right, Joe, who you got?
Well, my surprise make is the easiest one. I think Tariq Carpenter has done enough special teams wise and was actually showing some decent progress for the inside linebacker, considering he just moved to that position. So I really think that he could be somebody who can make that roster. Now, my surprise cut, it's hard to do because I don't think there's really going to be much of a surprise on anything. Unless they turn around and cut like AJ Dillon or something, which I don't see happening. It really is not. But just because we were just talking about how he was a Bisaccia guy and you would probably have to go through Bisaccia to do it, I think Tariq Carpenter could take Dalvin Levitt's spot.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which, like I said, which isn't much of a surprise other than him being a Bisaccia guy. But I think Tariq could take either Levitt's spot or take Eric Wilson's spot.
Wilson played. I think Wilson had the most special team snaps.
Yeah.
Of anyone.
And he was there. Yeah. And I think he was one of the top 2 rated guys.
Dude, he blocked a punt the first week he was here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that would be big, but something big happens every training camp. So
and Tariq Carpenter was having a hell of a game against Seattle. Yep. He almost got home a couple of different times on pass rush. I think he was one of the guys. Him and I'm gonna fuck up his name.
JJ.
JJ.
Yeah,
JJ.
And Ogbury.
I think it was him and JJ that almost got home on one of the punts. Yep. So, I mean, I think he really has a shot to be that, 3rd or 4th inside linebacker / your special teams guy.
No, and the thing that, like you said, Joe, the thing that he would bring to the table is not just special teams play, but as much as Bisaccia loves his guys, the thing that'll tip it the other way is if you're almost as good or better at special teams and you have some glimmer of future at a position you're listed at kind of thing. So, and that position isn't just special teamers. So,
right.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Like I said, Carpenter really showed himself well because I didn't think he had a great game against New England, but he looked a lot better against Seattle. He looked a lot more comfortable, more confident. granted, New England, like, it was like 2 days after he had returned to practice kind of thing and stuff, but he just looked a lot more settled and acquitted with himself at inside linebacker against Seattle. So, and like, it's one of those, inside linebacker is one of those positions. If he's not making a big play, he's giving up a big play kind of thing. But I thought he was in the right spots in coverage. He was around the ball a couple times. And like you said, showed up on a couple different punt rushes and showed some pass rush ability.
I just thought of one, and this one would be amazing depending on the guy's injury. Surprise cut, Josiah DeGuara. I'm sorry, Fred Thurston. I know that's your guy, but I could see it happening. And Henry Pearson making the team because he's your true fullback.
I think the lack of depth in the tight end room might make that a little bit more challenging.
Yeah,
and then that also calls into question of how they feel about Austin Allen. Is he even somebody that they're going to evaluate and potentially try to get up by the end of the season too? I have no idea. And don't forget, I mean, what did Matt LaFleur say in his rookie season? And DeGuara's, I love Josiah.
Yeah.
You're breaking up a very, very strong bond there.
I know. Well, and Love has love for DeGuara because that's been his main target for a while. But I just don't think he was showing out as much as we had hoped during the preseason. Whereas, that Henry Pearson, and trust me, it's not just bias because we share a last name or anything. But, he really was making some decent run blocks and pass protection and stuff like that. But again, it all depends on what his injury situation is going to be like. But what else you got for us, Mike? I don't think we should hold Perone hostage for very much longer.
No, that's pretty much it.
Somebody's going to be coming to look for him here pretty soon.
No, trust me, absolutely not. Nobody.
Okay, so if we got time, can I share a quick Bisaccia story?
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
So I had like I said earlier, I went up to OTAs in June, towards the very end of it, and I'm a big autograph guy, so I kind of stood outside the fence and was waiting. So I have two kind of Bisaccia stories. One is on one of the days it just rained. It was like monsoon rain, just horrible. Well, I was driving by Lambeau on Oneida Street, and I saw this guy in full Packer getup. The sweats, the slicker, everything. And I looked over. It's Rich freaking Bisaccia. He was walking from Lambeau all the way to the practice field in this pouring ass rain, and I'm just like, holy hell, this guy is dedicated.
Yeah. You didn't offer to give him a ride?
Well, by the time I had passed, I'm like, what the hell? Because I would have never thought Rich Bisaccia is going to be walking from Lambeau in the pouring ass rain. And then number two is I was actually at the fence getting out, and he come up, and I was getting Matt LaFleur's autograph on something, and Bisaccia comes walking by, and I always wear a Hawkeye hat. Because I'm that type of guy that, I'm going to go to Wisconsin in full Hawkeye get up. So I'm wearing my Hawkeye hat and I hear, "Go Hawks." I'm like, what? And it's Rich Bisaccia, "Go Hawks." And just in this really intense voice, I was like, "Yeah, go Hawks. What are you thinking of Van Ness?" "I like him." And he walked in.
Yeah.
That guy is so intense and there's nothing to him, but you piss him off and man, he goes nuts.
Yeah. No, yeah. And we love that intensity.
Yeah.
Love that intensity. I mean, that's the AGM you're talking about right there. So
yeah.
If you want to know who's making this team and not making this team, don't go to Brian Gutekunst's house. Go to Rich Bisaccia's house. That's who I want to be talking to figure out what exactly it is that's going on. But no, guys, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, talking little Packers on this very pivotal show, the roster prediction show. I guess the next time you guys go on, we'll know a lot more about what the 2023 Packers are going to look like.
Yep. Hopefully a lot of our predictions have taken place, especially the Royce Newman thing, because he's got to go.
Friend of the show.
I will personally drive to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and pack his things up and get him out of there. I mean, I'll do it for free. Yeah. I will pay you $100 to let me do it. Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah. One-way ticket back to Ole Miss if you need one, Royce.
But Jason, it's always great to have you on here. I know we were kind of lacking in the Spaceballs references, so Brian Maffey's going to be kind of pissed off at us. But
Most epic failure possible, but he will make up for it in the GIF conversation on Twitter. So you'll have that to look forward to over the next couple days.
And I promise it won't be another 8 months before we get you back on.
All right. I'm holding you to it. I'll crash if I have to. I've got the link now. I know how to get into the show.
There you go. I'm waiting for it.
Well, welcome aboard, Mike. It's great to have you on here. Looking forward to your season. And thanks again, guys. I appreciate it.
Nope. Thank you very much, Jason. It was great to have you on. And we want to thank all of you for tuning in to this week's edition of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. And once again, thank you to our guest, Jason Perone, at Jason Perone on Twitter. Please make sure to listen to the Quick Slants pod this week. Should have dropped by now. Also, check him out on PackADay. Jason, are you still with Eckel at this point? I feel like you guys have shifted so many times. I've lost who's with who at this point.
I am, yes. Thursday edition of the PackADay podcast. And we have Mark Ross, former AGM of I know he's with the Eagles. He's with a couple of other teams as well. He's going to join us for a conversation about Jordan Love, which is very timely ahead of the season. And spoiler alert, he's a fan. So if you want to hear some good things about Jordan Love, check out the Thursday edition of PackADay this week.
Right. And I promise Jason didn't pay us to let him plug all this stuff either.
Absolutely not. We don't do that kind of thing. bring your weather forecast to Jason. Him and Mark like to go through that on their pod. Once again, that is Joe at Iowa_Joe86. I am at Kawano Mike. We are the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Thank you for joining us. The new episode will drop every Tuesday of every week. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Mahalo for spending time with us, and aloha.